Wow, there is so much to say, but you all have to go home at a certain hour, so I can't say too much. And then the other challenge I have is there are people here who have not only heard me once or twice or 3 times, but even 4 times, and people who haven't heard me at all. So I'm going to be doing my best to try to give some new information that even those who've heard me before will come out with some more information. And then there are going to be some pieces of information that I'm repeating, so forgive me if I go over that. Before I do, Arnie actually asked me before the evening, he said, Avi, you know what, I'd like for you also to focus upon some of the history. You touched upon it, something not everyone knows all the history. I obviously can't go through all the history. There is a lot of history for the Jewish people and our ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. But I will touch over a couple of things. But that actually is very, very important that Arnie asked me to do that. Because here we are an audience of adults. And some of you are probably older than me. Probably. And even you, with your life experience, years of education and knowledge, are still not totally familiar with all of the history of the our people, the Jewish people. And if you're not Jewish, then it's even harder to be familiar with the history of the Jewish people and with our ancestral homeland, Israel. Which brings me to the reason, one of the reasons I'm coming on these speaking tours, and Stephen is helping me, because just think of it, you are adults with your knowledge and experience and life and education. And I'm worried about your kids and grandkids and their peers who have less information than you, who are literally, wherever they are, whether they're in college, whether they're at work, whether they're in high school, it's all a battlefield now. Life is now a battlefield for a Jew, because every single Jew is right now having to defend himself as a Jew because of what's going on in Israel today. Whether they're connected to Israel, whether they've ever been to Israel, whether they like Israel, whether they're against Israel, doesn't make a difference. Every single person today, no matter what his or her age, the second they're identified as a Jew, they're being attacked for being a Jew. And what scares me, because I'm an organizational psychologist, bachelor's and master's degree, so I know the psychology of man. And I know that plenty of these kids, and even the college kids, right? You think they're mature, they're old enough, they're about to go to the workforce. Some of them are so embarrassed because they don't have enough knowledge about their own identity. We have one of the oldest identities in the world. Thousands of years. Our identity literally goes back to the Bible. Literally. We have so much to be proud of, and so much to know about our own history. And our kids are out on the battlefield with blanks because they don't even have the basic information about their identity, about their history, about the history of the land of Israel, and forget about what's going on today. So them being under attack for being a Jew, many of them are so embarrassed they're going to run away from being a Jew. They're literally going to run away. And hopefully it's none of your children or grandchildren, but I'm sure you know plenty of people of many ages who, whether before or definitely now, are so embarrassed about the headlines and feeling as if they're the ones taking the brunt because they represent the Jewish state of Israel. Plenty of them are going to be lost to the Jewish people. And the project that I'm working on right now, because I run a nonprofit organization, it's a 501c3 in America, even though we run it both in Israel and here. It's about giving the education and the tools to the collegiates and to the high school kids that we're able to reach out to using social media so that they can be able to engage and be vocal, proud Jews not feeling that they're on the defense of being Jews, but being on the offense. Being on the offense, all right? Because we have so much to be proud of. The information is totally on our side. Totally! Everything you read in the news is 180 degrees the opposite. If you see something's bad about Israel, that means it's good about Israel, and you're just being told the wrong information. And we just have to reach these kids and provide them, and again, it's not just kids, it's collegiates, with the proper information to be proud Jews, to be proud of their heritage, to be proud of their ancestral homeland Israel, to be proud of the state of Israel today, to be proud of how Israel is fighting this war today. The most moral army in the world that we're fighting with our hands tied behind our back. I'm not even going to the details yet. And to be able to help them so that they won't be running away from their Judaism and be lost to the Jewish people, but we could bring them closer and prouder. And that's what I'm here for in the project I'm about, which I'll get more into the details later. I'll have a little video to show you. Now I want to segue into a little piece of Torah that also connects to everything we're going to get into. In Judaism, we're about to experience one of the highlights of the Jewish year. It's called Shabbat HaGadol. The Big Shabbat. When is the Big Shabbat? Shabbat HaGadol. It is the Shabbat before the Passover holiday. And the rabbis asked, why is it called Shabbat HaGadol? What's so big about this Shabbat? What's so different about this Shabbat than all other Shabbats in the year? And the answer is, it goes back to the Bible. Because the Shabbat, the Hebrew date in the Bible of the 10th of Nisan, that was on Saturday. It was Shabbat in the Bible. And God commanded the Jewish people to take a sheep to be able to then do a barbecue for Passover. Right? Because that's what it was. What we eat on Passover, the special, what's called Korban Pesach, it's the sacrificial lamb for Passover. It was a barbecue. Right? So God told the Jews back then to take it on the 10th of Nisan, the 10th day of the month, Jewish month of Nisan, and then they did the barbecue on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, and then the holiday of Passover is on the 15th. Okay? So, what's the big deal? Why a big Shabbat? What's so big about the Shabbat? So some of the rabbis answer, now anyone who knows history would know that the sheep was an idol, was a god of Egyptian culture. And God told the Jews to take a sheep to slaughter and barbecue. Now, under normal conditions, they just went through hundreds of years of slavery, right? When you're a slave, you're afraid of your own shadow. You're afraid of punishment. You're afraid of being screamed at, of doing something wrong. And here, they listened to God's command, and they took the sheep even though they knew it was a god of the Egyptians, and the Egyptians would be upset at them. So what's the miracle? Why was it the big Shabbat? That the Egyptians did not get upset. Because it's their God, they should be upset, right? And again, this is after the 10 plagues. So there's some rabbis who say, want to know something? The miracle is actually deeper than that. It's not that the Egyptians didn't get upset at them. It's that the Jews listened to God and to take that sheep and overcame their fears of what the Egyptians would do to them. That was the miracle. Because think about it. We're all human. When you're afraid, you don't do something. When you're afraid of punishment, they could be killed. They're about to take the sheep, to slaughter the sheep, to slaughter the god of the Egyptians. And the miracle is that they no longer feared that, and they listened to God's command to take it. And that was why we call this Shabbat, Shabbat HaGadol. That the Jews did what they were supposed to do and overcame the natural inclination, the natural fear. What's the connection to today? Very simple, folks. Very simple. I'll be louder.
Gadol, gadol.
We are in the middle of a war where the Israeli army basically went into Gaza, which is, it's not the most populated place in the world, even though that's another one of the lies put in the media. But it's very populated. And it's very hard to fight urban warfare. Very hard. For years, I know, all of Israel knows, that Hamas uses its hospitals as terror headquarters. This is not news. We've known this for years, over a decade. The Israeli army knows this. The Israeli government knows this. And yet, in every single operation until today, the Israeli army was always afraid to do any military operation, not only in Gaza, but specifically to go after the Hamas headquarters in the hospitals. We're going to look horrible to the world. How can we do that? Right? To the extent that one of the senior commanders of the army then, and today he's in the government, he is on videotape saying, "I am proud that I risked the lives of Israeli soldiers not to attack the hospital."
Right.
And I was like, I was cringing when this was a few years ago. And this guy is someone who wants to be the prime minister. I'm like, that's what he's proud of? He's proud of sacrificing the lives of Israeli soldiers so as not to attack a hospital? We're going to pay with our lives for that. Because by not going after the terrorists in the hospital, well, that means more innocent Israelis are going to be killed. Because the terrorists are going to be able to continue terrorizing us. What's the connection between Shabbat HaGadol and the miracle I told you? Because today, the Jewish people in the land of Israel are finally overcoming our natural fear of what the world would say, fear of the immoral standards of the world, and finally doing what we have to do, acting as a moral people. Because the morality, the basics of a government, the first responsibility of every government is what? Protect your civilians. Protect your citizens. How can you explain the moral thought process? I can't attack the terrorist because I might kill someone innocent because he's in a hospital, which basically allows your citizens to be terrorized continuously and not stopped. So the process we are going through today as the Jewish people, the land of Israel, while it is still hard for a Western-oriented mindset to understand, but the survival instinct we can understand, is we're finally reclaiming our identity and our reality. And when we see and we hear the miracles of the fights taking place in Gaza on a day-to-day basis, the amount of heroism taking place in Gaza from our unbelievable soldiers, it's unbelievable. I'll get into some of the details in a few minutes. But in all of my programming, I talk about it and I explain we are witnessing a generation of King David-like Jewish soldiers, Jewish warriors that we haven't seen in thousands of years. And that's taking into consideration all of the modern wars of Israel. The level of heroism that we're experiencing today, Israeli soldiers are being pulled out of Gaza. Any other army in any other war, a soldier would say, "I'm out, I'm throwing off my uniform, I never want to put my uniform on again, get me out of here. Give me a one-way ticket to Australia." Every single soldier who's being pulled out of Gaza is then asking their commanders, "When are we going back?" Because they all want to finish the job. They know the evil that they're up against in Gaza. They know that these terrorists are coming out of tunnels out of the ground, using women and children as human shields, that the fighting is evil, evil, and very, very dangerous. And knowing that and experiencing that, they all want to go back to finish the job. That's the King David-like spirit we have in our youth today in Israel. And that's not in the war of words like you're experiencing here in America. That's in the war of bullets. Well, their lives are really being lost. Just in my own synagogue, we've already lost two of our two soldiers, young soldiers. One who sits behind me 10 rows, and one who sits on the other side of me. One was at my son's wedding 5 months ago. He's no longer. He lives across the street, him and his family. And another one from friends of the family lived down the block. That's two from our own synagogue. And in our community, of Efrat, we've lost 8. And then in our municipality, I think we've lost over 20, 30 guys. Just in our municipality. And with that, and this is very important to understand, and with that, the level of motivation to continue until we finish the job is up to the heavens. And that's the King David-like spirit we have in our youth in Israel today. The level, if you look at the statistics, every 3 months there's another, what's it called in English? Enlistment to the army. Okay, my son enlisted in March 23. They just did it. They just had the enlistment for March 24. Okay, the numbers are going up for how many 18, 19-year-olds are requesting to fight in the fighting units, not going down. Right? And I'm familiar with the Vietnam War. My father got out of the draft. Right? He went off to go into education in order to get out of the draft. Plenty of Americans did not want to fight in the Vietnam War because of all the politics there, and that's normal. What normal kid in the middle of a war wants to fight? Obviously, some of you are from the greatest generation of America, World War II, where, yeah, there was that level of motivation to fight. But in normal situations, kids want to run away from being enlisted to have to fight in a war. And here in Israel today, the numbers are going through the roof of the percentage of those requesting to go into the fighting units. And what I want to do is help our youth here be King David-like proud Jews in their lives to stand up for themselves in the war of words, in the battle that's taking place here, whether they recognize it or not, in order to save their souls to remain part and proud of their Jewish identity within the Jewish people. Now let me go back into a little history. All right? And there is so much to unpack, and I'm going to try to give information that not all of you heard, but some of the information I'm going to give again. And I'll start by saying this. And this is also, I'd say, simple bits of information that are 100% factually true, that 99% of our youth are not cognizant of. Alright? And here's the first one. We are the most blessed generation of Jews, probably since biblical times. Why? Because after experiencing 2,000 plus years of exile and persecution, 2,000 years, we are the only indigenous people in the world to have returned to our ancestral homeland and to be sovereign in our ancestral homeland. And again, fact check me. Tell me one other indigenous people that lost their land that is back as sovereign in their ancestral homeland. So far, no one's been able to tell me any other one. We're the only one. Do you know how proud our kids should be knowing that? I try to tell whenever I talk to kids, when I talk to youth, and especially college students, I'm like, we're supposed to be the poster child of every college, university, campus today. They talk about oppressed and oppressor and victimhood. We're the only people in the world to overcome victimhood and come back sovereign in our ancestral homeland and building a country up that's not only doing good for our own people, but we do so much good for the whole world. Israel, the state, is smaller than the state of New Jersey. Yet, if I'm not mistaken, the last statistics, we are the 14th biggest economy in the world. We're a tiny country. Almost 76 years old, that's it. Established after we experienced the worst genocide of a people in modern history. 6 million of our people massacred by the Nazis just 80 plus years ago. And yet we're now the 14th most successful economy on the world. And yet we have our own Jewish kids who are embarrassed about being Jews. There's so much to be proud of to be a Jew today. And like I said, we should be the poster child in all these college campuses. The university professors should be saying, "You're a Jew? Oh my God, we are so jealous of you because you overcame your victimhood and look where your people are today in the Jewish state of Israel." But no, that's not what's happening because no one's paying attention to the facts. No one cares about facts anymore. It's all about narratives and all about ideology. So that's one piece of information that's important for our children to understand and internalize. Here's another one. And I'll touch upon Gaza for a second. Okay? Gaza. I don't know how many of you sing the Shabbat songs at the Shabbat table, but on Friday nights, there is a song that is sung, that's in the Shabbat booklets. It's a song that's called Yaribon. Anyone sing Yaribon at the Shabbat table? All right, Yaribon. All right? So we got some people. I love it. Like to sing it every Friday night with my kids at the table. By the way, I forgot to say the most important thing about myself. Happily married to my wife Rachel for 27 years. 4 boys. Our oldest got married 6 months ago with the first week in the war. It was a war wedding, which was crazy. Second one, he's in the reserves. Second is commando unit for the paratroopers, and he's in and out of Gaza in this war. Number 3 is in pre-military academy, Torah studies, sitting and learning Torah, strengthening himself before he goes to the army in another 1.5 years. And then a teenager in high school, about to be 15 years old. So that's our family. And I lost my train of thought. What was I saying right before about family? Yaribon. Yaribon, thank you. So I'd like to sing at the Shabbat table with my family, Yaribon. Yaribon is a song that was composed by a rabbi, and I forgot his name, who lived around 500 years ago. And guess where he lived 500 years ago when he composed the song? Gaza! Gaza! Because Jews used to live in Gaza hundreds of years ago. In the Israel Museum, anyone who's been there, and if you haven't, or if you haven't, you haven't seen it, you can go see the exhibit of the mosaic of a synagogue that was in Gaza hundreds of years ago. 1920s, there was a Jewish community where? In Gaza. You want to know why there's no Jewish community in Gaza after the 1920s? Because in 1929, the Arabs went on a rampage massacring Jews across the Holy Land. And the British, who were in charge at the time, they did not want to protect the Jews, so they told the Jews of Gaza to run away because we can't protect you. So from 1929 until 1970, there were no Jews living in Gaza. Not because we don't belong there, not because we don't have a history there, but because, once again, there was aggression used against us by enemies, and we weren't able to be protected because we weren't in charge of ourselves. So I'm just giving you a little history and context. And how many of you knew that about our history with Gaza? Right? And if you don't know it, how many of our youth know it? Very few. Because in the narrative of the media, Gaza is like, Gaza belongs to a people called Palestinians. The Jews have no connection to Gaza. Now, Jews should be forbidden to live in Gaza. Which brings up another point. If someone would tell you, no, you can't have an Arab living in Jerusalem. That's forbidden. No, they don't belong there. What would you think? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. That make sense? Okay. But it's accepted to say, and these are global politicians. You're talking about U.S. presidents, European politicians, United Nations. Oh yeah, Jews can't live in Gaza. No, that's forbidden. That's forbidden. Jews can't live in what's called the West Bank, which it's not even the West Bank, which I'll get to in a second. That's forbidden. That's only for the Arabs. What universe are we living in that's accepted? Like, can't people use their own logic? And I'll really make it clear for you. I don't know if there's a city called Bethlehem in Florida, but I know there's a city called Bethlehem in Pennsylvania. I know there's a Bethlehem in Texas. I know there are like 70 Bethlehems all across the United States of America. Guess what? I have no clue how many Jews live in any of them, but Jews can live in them. I'm sure there's Jews living in every single one of them, probably, right? So you can have a Jew living in Bethlehem, Texas, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Utah, whatever, right? But no, no, no. No, it's forbidden for a Jew to live in Bethlehem, Israel, where King David was born. But does that make sense to you? But that's the reality. We have all been brainwashed to accept apartheid against Jews. You get that? The news is saying that Israel is the apartheid state, but yet I live right next to Bethlehem. From my porch, I see Bethlehem. And then over Bethlehem, I see Jerusalem. I see the Temple Mount. And Bethlehem is 2 minutes from my community. And yet, there's a big sign on the road right in front of the entrance to Bethlehem that said it's forbidden for a Jew to enter. Who's the apartheid against? It's against the Jew. Arabs can come into my community. We travel the roads together. We go shopping together. I'm not allowed into Bethlehem. And if I would go into Bethlehem by accident, my life would be in danger. So again, everything we're being told by the media is 180 degrees the opposite. So now we touched upon like some history of Gaza. I got into media. Those who are not yet familiar, I have a daily video podcast called The Pulse of Israel. I didn't start in media. I started as an organizational psychologist. My first job was working as a management consultant for the consulting firm called Accenture, which I started out working for Arthur Andersen, if anyone's familiar with the accounting world back from 30, 40 years ago. All right, so I used to work for Arthur Andersen, worked for Accenture, opened up their office in Tel Aviv. I had no connection to media, no connection to marketing, but I'm very, very passionate about my Jewish identity, about the Jewish people, about Israel, about the truth. And to make a very, very long story short, due to my political activism for Israel, I ended up sneaking into the Gaza Strip before the summer of 2005 to try to help stop that from happening. Didn't succeed. But I was actually, because I was an English speaker and I was in the Gaza Strip, I was volunteered to be a spokesperson for the media. So I was interviewed by the New York Times, the BBC, France, whatever, all over the world. And they would always ask me, what are you doing here? The Israeli government made a decision to destroy 21 Jewish communities and expel 10,000 Jews. How are you going to stop it? And my answer was very simple. I'm like, you have to understand. First of all, we know we can't stop the government. Whatever the government, whatever the army wants to do, they're going to do. But I can tell you one thing. I believe in God. And I believe that me as a person, it's our responsibility to do everything I can within the law to stand up for what I believe in. And things happen in life. Things can change. And this is the Middle East. Things can happen like this in the Middle East. Who knows? A war could start out between Sudan and whatever, and all of a sudden, nothing's going to happen here in Israel. Who knows? Our job is just to be here, stand up for truth, stand up for reality, stand up for our beliefs, and we hope and pray by also taking action that hopefully it will stop. It didn't stop. But to make a long story short, I ended up producing a movie about what happened to the Jews of the Gaza Strip that summer. And that ended up me leaving my career in management consulting and going in the direction of media for Israel. So I was one of the first accounts on YouTube, one of the first accounts on Facebook, thinking, let me use this internet to get the truth out to people about Israel. So back to the war, because I want to finish on inspiring information for you, and then show you a video about this project that I'm working on that I would appreciate all the assistance to help in order to reach as many youth as possible. Stephen reflected upon it before. Let's start with the depressing. There's a very depressing mood in the state of Israel right now, because we have 134 captives still in Gaza. And it's the knowledge that nobody in the world cares. Like, we've just had 2 months of virtually no activity by our military to save 134 captives who are probably being sexually abused, mentally abused, physically abused, multiple times a day for whoever's still alive. Why? Because the world won't let us. Like, what? Think for a second. Think for a second, honestly. I mean, we're in America. If instead of Israel, this was America, and there were Mexico, okay? Mexico on the border. Mexicans infiltrated into America, massacred on the percentage level, tens of thousands of Americans, took thousands of Americans into Mexico as captives. What would America be doing right now?
Send their army into Mexico and be invading Mexico and do whatever it takes.
Mexico would be destroyed. Destroyed. Level. Would America take 2 months off because wait, no, we have to think about what to do with the civilians on the Mexican border before we do anything to get our captives? Nothing. Nothing. And I'm holding back tears because we have been stopped from saving fellow Jews, human beings, forget about them being Jews, human beings for 2 months because of immoral political considerations by governments around the world, being led, unfortunately, by the United States of America. And unfortunately, the mood is depressing because we all know probably most of those 134 captives are probably no longer alive, and we could have saved them if we would have continued the war 2 months ago and not stopped because the world stopped us. So we're very, very depressed. We know we're on our own. We are totally on our own. We're fighting the most just and moral war that's taking place today in the world, and yet we can't even save our captives because the world is treating us like the enemy. And I'll give you one little example to understand this. Just follow the news. And even though I always tell people, do not listen to the news, but if you do listen to the news, follow the logic of the news, because this is what's going on. And again, follow me and check the headlines if you're into watching the news. The Biden administration says, Israel, you must have a ceasefire, make a deal with Hamas. Israel says, fine. Okay? Israel says, fine. Next day's headline. Now we're waiting for Hamas to give an answer. First of all, isn't that insane? Why are we waiting for the evil terror organization to give an answer? But put that aside. We're waiting for an answer from Hamas. Oh, next day's headline. Hamas says no. Next day's headline. The Biden administration. Bibi Netanyahu is at fault. We're going to punish Bibi Netanyahu. We're going to punish Israel. We're going to withhold weapons from Israel. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Bibi, do more. All right? Bibi gives more. We're going to capitulate even to more Hamas demands. Next day's headlines. We're waiting for Hamas's answer. Next day's headlines. Hamas says no. Next day's headlines. Once again, now we have Blinken, or we have Schumer, or we have someone. No, Israel isn't doing enough. We need a ceasefire. We have to look after the innocents in Gaza. Israel, you have to capitulate more and more. Does that make any sense? No. This isn't a television show. This isn't a horror movie. This isn't even an alternate universe. This is our reality. So the feeling in Israel is we're alone. And on the one hand, we're depressed that we're alone. We can't even save our own captives. Then we come to the other side. Then we come to the proud King David-like spirit. And again, the Bible tells us, God tells us, the Jewish people at the end of the day, we're alone. Am levadad yishkon. The Jewish people, listen, the Bible is a roadmap for life, for the life of the Jewish people, for eternity. And he told us, we are alone. We've deluded ourselves. We still live with everybody. We still want to be friends with everybody. We still want to work. And we do have allies. But on the public level, we're feeling it. I mean, a majority of the American people are with us. 100%. The problem is not the American people. The problem is government and media. They're the ones that set the narrative. And then, so we're alone in doing what we have to do. So that's the good thing. That's leading to the good thing, which how I started off with the Torah about Shabbat HaGadol, of having to overcome our fear. Because now the Jewish people are realizing we can't be afraid of what the world says anymore. We have to save our captives. We have to win the war. And I tell people, you want to know when everyone asks, when's the war going to be over? When's the war going to be over? Right? And it doesn't make a difference what pressure we have from the world. Right? The war is only going to end when everyone, and there are around 70,000, 80,000 Israelis evacuated from their homes on the Gaza border, and another 70,000, 80,000 Israelis evacuated from their homes on the northern border. The war is going to end when all of those evacuees return to their homes without any fear of an October 7th happening again. That is the spirit of the Israeli people today. They don't care about what Biden says. They don't care about what Blinken says. They don't care about the United Nations. They want to finish this war, finish our enemies in the south and in the north, so that everyone can return home. No fear of October 7th happening again. That's not going to happen tomorrow. That probably is not going to happen within a half a year. Don't know how long it's going to take. And it doesn't make a difference if we pull our troops out or we only have this much troops or we stop this. The war is not over until that happens. And it's not because of Bibi Netanyahu. Like again, what we saw of the American government, they were trying to give over the narrative that Netanyahu is the problem. If only they move Netanyahu, they can have peace. And they have a big mistake. And anyone who follows my programs, I've talked about this a lot. Biden is not taking on Netanyahu. Biden is taking on the Israeli people. The Israeli people are in it to win to the end. Total victory. And no, even if Biden threatens to chop off Netanyahu's head, which again, I'm totally exaggerating here, but I'm giving you like the nth degree here, it's not going to end. We're going to continue. Because we have no other choice. We have no other choice in order to return everyone back to their homes. And we have no other choice in order to instill the deterrence necessary to live in the most violent area of the world, where Muslims kill Muslims on a daily basis and the world doesn't even care. They only make it headlines when they can blame the Jews. Right? I mean, just recently, a number of years ago, Bashar Assad murdered 600,000 Muslims in his own country, Syrian citizens. He murdered Palestinian Arabs. Did the world care? Were there protests in the streets? Anything from the world screaming war crimes? Nothing. No Jews, no news. Arabs can kill Arabs, Muslims can kill Muslims, but when Israel's doing it to defend itself, we're the bad guy. Now we'll get to the last piece of factual information and tie it all together. In June, I had a conference in Jerusalem. Anyone ever been to the Begin Center in Jerusalem?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a conference at the Begin Center, and the title of the conference was Unmasking the Anti-Semitism Behind the Palestinian National Movement. Okay? And this is something that I've been talking about for years that's been ignored. Why is that such an important topic? Because today, you read the news, you talk to the kids, you listen to even in Jewish schools, and even Orthodox schools, what do they talk about? They talk about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Okay? Now, I want to challenge you all. And again, fact check me. Don't trust me for anything. Do this on your own. Before Israel was established in 1948, go to the New York Times. Go to every single publication at the time, during the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. When the term Palestinian was used, who did it refer to?
Jews.
That's so important, everybody. That is so important. Before 1948, there was no people called Palestinians. There was none. None. It was the Jews who were the Palestinians. Again, fact check me on everything. The Palestine Post turned to be the Jerusalem Post. It was run by Jews. The Palestine Philharmonic, Jews. The Palestine Soccer Team, Jews. The Palestine Electric Company, Jews. There was no, what?
Palestine Bank.
Palestine Bank, right? Bank Leumi, right? Everything referred to Jews. You look at, go back to the headlines, archive it, go Google me. Don't trust me. All the headlines where Arabs are attacking the Jews and the Palestinian Jews, or Arabs attacking Palestinians. It's like you try to put those headlines next to today's headlines, but like, oh my God, it's two different worlds. The Palestinians were the Jews before 1948. And today, all of a sudden, there are people that the whole world is supporting because they're the rightful owners of the Jewish homeland? Alright? Even further than that. Even further. Search and read the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947. Okay? There is a call for the creation of a Jewish state and an Arab state. There is no mention of a Palestinian people or the creation of a state called Palestine because they didn't exist. They're a fiction. And now let's go even further. And again, I'm sure many of you don't know this information, and your kids and grandkids definitely don't know it, and they need to know it. Between 1948 and 1967, who was in charge of, again, it's not the right terminology. I call it Judea and Samaria. It's not the West Bank. You know what the West Bank refers to?
Jordan.
No. What does the West Bank refer to?
Judea and Samaria.
What? Wait, but the term. When you hear a term called the West Bank.
Of the Jordan River.
Of the Jordan River. It's a bank of a river. It's a bank of a river. It's a geographic description. It's not the name of an entity that belongs to a people. It's just describing the area on the western side of a river. The West Bank of the Jordan River. But it's used as a way to disconnect Jews from our homeland. Because why are we called Jews? Where does it come from?
Judea.
Judea! That's the historic name of the West Bank. That's why they don't use it. Because if everyone would be using the word Judea and Samaria, then everyone would say, oh yeah, that's the Jewish homeland. Yeah, of course the Jews belong there. But the second, every day, the narrative and the media and the politicians use the word West Bank, West Bank, West Bank, West Bank. Oh, the Jews have no connection. It's not Jewish. It's Arab. It belongs to Palestinians. So West Bank is a fiction. Palestinians are a fiction. And yet, our kids are on the front line having to defend themselves when they don't even know that this is fiction. And they're always on the defensive. So Jordan was in charge of Judea and Samaria between 1948 and 1967. Egypt was in charge of Gaza between 1948 and 1967, right? Was there ever a call for the establishment of a state called Palestine for the Palestinians during those 19 years?
Never.
Don't you think if they really existed, if they were really a people, and that really was their homeland, that between 1940 and 1967, someone would have at least asked once, whether it would be the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Arab world, the United Nations, America? Nobody asked for it. Nobody asked for it. Because there was never a demand. There was never a people. That wasn't their homeland. Where did it come from? And again, don't trust Avi Abelo. Go do your own research. The Soviet Union in the beginning of the 1960s, as part of their strategy to destroy the Jewish state of Israel and hurt America, they came up with a disinformation campaign. Everyone remember the KGB famous disinformation campaigns, right? Well, this is probably, the Soviet Union's gone, the KGB is gone, but their most successful disinformation campaign still lives on. And that was the campaign called The Identity of Palestinians. Created by the KGB. Colonel Richard Kent talks about this all the time, writes about this all the time, and one of the leaders of the KGB was a defector from Romania. He's the one who's been interviewed over the years. I don't think he's alive anymore, but he was interviewed and talked about it and wrote about it for years. It's a fiction. It's a fiction created by the KGB. So now you're talking about a reality where the Jewish state of Israel and every single Jew and college student and high school student is trying to defend his Jewish identity, where everything about the Palestinian narrative is a lie. And I call it the biggest blood libel in all of history. It's the biggest blood libel because it's gone global. It's all over the world. Like when there were blood libels against the Jews in Europe, so there was a pogrom here, a pogrom there. This community people were killed. This community was affected. But it was localized. Now we're talking about a blood libel where the Jews in Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, London, Paris, Melbourne are now being attacked because of a blood libel called Palestine. So to end on the inspiration and then to show the video. God works in strange ways, and I'm not here to explain God at all. Not at all. But I do believe our purpose as humans, and especially as believing Jews, how we react to a situation. We can ask, why did God do this to me? Why did God do this to me? We won't get anywhere. It's like, okay, this happened. Now what does God expect of me? Right? The only thing we control in our lives, not how much money we have in our bank account. It's not if we have a job. It's not if we have a house. It's not if we have a wife or a husband. It's not if we have children. The only thing we control in our lives is our reactions to situations. That's the only thing we control. Everything else is out of our hands. Everything else, if you really dig deep into your head, you have to trust a higher power that I, as a believing Jew, believe is God. And then I focus, okay, how do I react? And today we have to teach everyone how to react. And in Israel today, the Jewish people are realizing the world has gone haywire, total immoral policies, treating us as the enemy. But we're proud Jews standing up for what we have to do. It's our homeland. We're going to defend ourselves. We're the fight of good against evil, like hasn't been like this. I mean, again, October 7th, you had an enemy literally live stream massacring innocent Jews. And not just innocent Jews, women and children and babies and grandmothers. Is there anything that epitomizes evil more than that? I mean, if you go to the Bible, the epitomization of evil is the people called Amalek, the Amalekites, right? What did the Amalekites do that made them so evil? They attacked the Jewish people out of Egypt from behind. Killing who? Killing all the women and children and elderly. That is the epitome of evil. We just experienced that. And the world is ignoring this evil and not standing with the good. The world is supporting evil. Like, the world is supporting evil. The Western enlightened world that we pride ourselves on. I went to Columbia University. I know plenty of you are probably proud of the universities your children went to, your grandchildren went to, and now you look at those universities, they are immoral, they are bastions of immorality. That's it. The places of higher learning that you prided yourselves on. The second you take God out of the equation, man screws it up and goes immoral. Because man thinks that morality comes from man. That's the whole battle against God. And that's why we're lucky. By sticking with our Jewish identity, sticking with God, we hold on to true morality, which is God Himself who gave it to us. So that is what's going on in the Jewish people of Israel today. There is a strengthening. I'll give you a funny story that shows this atmosphere. There was a girl who was going to the army, and her father, and it comes from a religious home, and the father goes, daughter, you're about to go to the army, you'll be able to find a nice shidduch. You'll be able to get a good partner in the army. A good yeshiva bacher, religious, he's Zionist, right, and the right values. You'll find a good guy. And the daughter goes back to the father. She goes, Dad, you don't understand. This is like after the war started. She goes, now all Israeli soldiers are wearing tzitzit and kippahs. You don't know who's religious anymore. Right? Now, that's a little exaggeration. It's not everyone, but it does give over the atmosphere within the Jewish people of Israel today, within the fighters and all of society. There is a rekindling of a Jewish spirit. There is a rekindling, regardless of religious level, of a Jewish identity and an understanding of the justice of our cause as being Jews living in our ancestral homeland that hasn't existed for many years. That is the positive, inspiring process we are going through as the Jewish people in Israel today. And that's why I'm coming over here and talking to whoever I can to help you feel that. Don't be depressed. There's depressing news, plenty of depressing news. But hold on to the positive. Focus on how we react, not just on the sadness. And help me reach the youth and the collegiates so that they have the proper information and tools to be able to deal with what I believe is the growing. What we're experiencing today is just the beginning. It's just the beginning. It's going to get much worse. There's a tsunami coming. On the schools, on the college campuses, in the streets, it's coming. And we have to prepare our kids and their friends to deal with it so they can stand up and be the King David-like Jews of this generation, understanding our true reality today, and not be washed away and brainwashed and afraid and embarrassed. All right? So now I'm going to put the video on, if I can figure out how to do this now. Jews worldwide today feel trapped as victims of the most virulent hatred since the Holocaust. They are confused about why they are having to defend their very existence as Jews. Some have even lost friends, and they are realizing their lack of engagement with our people in Israel and our ancestral homeland of Israel has left them in the dark. So where are all the Jewish educational institutions and organizations that operate on college campuses? And what in the world have they been doing all these decades with our children who then proceed to college? Why are so many Jewish kids today without the tools to advocate for themselves? Sporting teams have an offense and a defensive line of players. No game can be won with only one of them. So why do organizations today mostly only play defense, highly focused on fighting the daily lies about Israel and the Jewish people? At Pulse of Israel, we are going to change the approach and go on the offensive with young adults from coast to coast. We recognize that at the core of the growing anti-Semitism today is the Palestinian national movement. Our goal is to work with students, your children or grandchildren, and coach them so they have a clear understanding of the history of our people, the history of our people in the land of Israel, and the history of our people as it relates to global policies and the war against Israel and the Jewish people today. We do this in a way that will give them the tools to effectively engage in being vocal. Being a strong Jew is necessary now more than ever. And we know how very scary it is for these kids in the public atmosphere today. The Pulse of Israel Warriors Project will work with high school and college students so that they can effectively engage both the obvious anti-Semitism and the nuanced anti-Semitism that they may even encounter in a classroom setting. And this refers to a professor who takes a political stance in front of the whole class being aligned with the enemies of Israel. How should students respond in such situations? In addition to providing daily communications featuring top viral ideas for posts, Weekly mentorships and monthly Q&A sessions with influencers and thought leaders will also be made available for the students. We are going to work with the young warriors and give them the tools necessary to address any anti-Semitic encounter they may have while in high school or in college. We anticipate that this will have a multiplied effect and will in turn inspire thousands of students from coast to coast of the United States to want to engage with our Pulse of Israel Warriors project. The advantage of approaching anti-Semitism in this way, which is unlike any other organization that engages high school or college students today, will help to instill a Jewish pride that establishes a natural connection through the information and tools they receive to their brothers and sisters in Israel and their ancestral homeland. Join us today. And I want to give you an example of what's going wrong today. Got a little technology. And this is
successful. And suddenly I was doing the same thing. You're the voice of the people.
Someone else want to take this just in case it turns on? And this is a video that just was I just saw this week of one of the top. I'm not going to give it names because there are plenty of organizations that do a lot of great work, but they're still missing the boat and they're missing what really needs to be done. One of the top organizations, millions of dollars of donations every year, and they're star educators on college campuses telling the kids that Jews is their ancestral homeland. It's also the ancestral homeland of the Palestinians, and we're going to learn to live in peace with them. The second we're telling our kids that there is an existence of a people called Palestinians and that's their homeland, we pull the rug out from under our justice, from under the justice to our cause, because then everyone automatically goes, wait a second, it's called Palestine, there are Palestinians, then you're the outsiders. And then the Jewish kids are not able to defend themselves. So we are really the only organization out there providing what I call the inspiring, politically incorrect truth that needs to be said and given over to these kids so they're properly educated to be able to deal with what's going on. So anyway, you're all able to help. Very much appreciated. Just so you understand what the costs are involved, majority of the costs, I mean it's for the educational component, majority of the cost is to help get these kids materials be seen by their networks. I don't want 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds seeing videos of Avi Abelov talking. I want them seeing videos of 15-year-olds and 20-year-olds. I want a 15-year-old for his network of friends seeing him, not me. And in order to help their stuff get seen by hundreds of thousands of people, that's where a lot of the money goes to, because we know how to work with social media and to get stuff seen online and all the different social media platforms.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.